Hello and welcome. Happy holidays from the Fantasy Grounds Academy. I'm Laren and I am one of the instructors over in the community Discord. If you haven't joined our community, I will post a link at the end of the video. Also, I want to mention that there are some really good discounts and sales going on currently on the Fantasy Grounds store. If you're interested in trying Fantasy Grounds, get a subscription, download the free demo, plug that in, maybe get one book, like one of your core books from whatever rule set that you're interested in, and give it a try. If you don't like what you're getting, you can ask for a discount if you buy the content through the store. If you buy it through Steam, it's a little different. I think you only get an hour or so to return it. But if you get a subscription, it's pretty cheap. It's not very much. It's $4 a month for the standard, and it is only $10 a month for the ultimate. Or if you want to purchase it outright and not have to keep doing the subscription model, 25% off until the 5th of January, and that cuts off at around noon Eastern Time, US. So that's a big sale that's going on the Fantasy Grounds website. And if you go to the store, go to shop, which is one of the sections on the website, you'll see discounts that are the weekly discounts as well. So if you look on there, you'll see the sale price, and then the original price is knocked off. So probably saving anywhere from $1 to about $5, depending on the product and how much it's priced at. So that is something that you want to take advantage of if you can. If you got the extra money, if you got a gift card, whatever, I think this is a good way to spend your hard-earned cash. So here it actually shows the price. So if you were to buy the Fantasy Grounds Unity Standard license, it's basically $29.25. If you buy the Ultimate, it's $111.75. So that's US dollars. If you buy this on Steam, it'll be scaled or comparable to your local economy, so that price or that number might be different, but it's still going to be at the discount. Just remember that the return policy on Steam is different. So if you don't like it, you can always get rid of it within 30 days. You can ask for a discount. If you have a subscription and you start it and then you decide you don't want to keep it, try to keep it for the month, because if you cancel it, it's going to cancel it right then and there. It's not going to keep going for 30 days. So keep your subscription for 29 and a half days and then get rid of it. So if you want to use it for 30 days, make sure that you keep the sub active until the end of your grace period. So the next thing is the Tui Insanity Bundle. There are plenty of other sales on here, so not just Rob's, but they're the Tui Insanity Bundle I can speak on because I've used the product. So this contains a bunch of different things that are included, and this one just happens to be the 2021 sale. So if you've seen the social media post, you'll notice that it goes straight to there. So the bundle for me is cheaper because I already own some of it, but it's 75% off. So I mean, I don't know. Can't think of any other time he's done this. He usually does some kind of sale in the wintertime and around Christmas. He's actually going to let this ride for a while till the 1st. Usually it's only a day or two, but he's actually letting it ride until the 1st of the year. So this is something you want to pick up on. And what these are is a collection of tools and utilities and modules and some things that will help supplement your game and enhance it. It'll add things that you don't normally get with the base program, and it will allow you to harness the full power of Fantasy Grounds. If you're really new to all this may be something you want to pursue after you've got your feet wet, or maybe you want to buy it now and figure it out later. But nonetheless, these are some really good discounts, and I noticed there's other authors and other publishers that are putting out discounts too. So if you go to the DMs Guild, there's a lot of stuff on sale right now. And there's just a ton of, also the DMs Guild has their own sale going on too for Christmas related content or holiday related. So it's just something that you may want to take a look at. All right, so let's get back into the the actual GM, Dungeon Master, Game Master tutorial. It is something that most people have a little bit of curiosity about. Maybe they're unsure of how this works. So the first thing is you want to go to the website if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, download the demo. You want to create an account. So up here on the top right, there, you can make an account on here. And then once you've done that, you install the software, and it is available for Mac, Linux, and Windows. So once you've installed the application, you go into the settings, which is where you're going to plug in your username and your password, and it's the same one as you use on the Fantasy Grounds store. So once you do that, you click login, you hit save, then you update Fantasy Grounds, and then once you've updated, it'll come back up, and then you plug in your license if you have one, and then you hit save, and then it will put in your license data. Once you've done that, then it will take you back to either this update screen or the launcher. So you want to click on update once you've put in your data, and that will pull in your license or any content that you've purchased. So if you purchased a license and maybe a couple books, it won't let you purchase any books until you actually get a license. And if it does let you purchase it, then you're not going to be able to access them until you've put in your license data. So make sure you do all that first before you get into the Fantasy Grounds interface. So right now it's checking the store for anything I've purchased. It's checking the new Forge, which is where the community-made products are. And then once it's done, you can click Launch Fantasy Grounds, and you should be good to go as far as that goes, as far as your account data goes. So once you've done that, it'll tell you your license status up here on the top right, and over here on the left should be your username. So that's basically what you want to see when you first start. So on the front here are a bunch of help guides. There's a quick start guide. If you click on that, it'll take you as a shortcut to a quick start, kind of like what I'm going through here. There's a user manual, some basic guides. There's some things about game systems in particular. There's a thing about content for getting download content. The Fantasy Grounds forums is where you want to post most of your problems or account issues and those sort of things. If you put it on Discord or Facebook, you're probably not going to get a good answer. And if you do, it's just people trying to help you out. So if you want something a little more official, go to the forums or go to the Fantasy Grounds Discord. They have their own personal Discord. There's some FAQs, and if you have a money issue or subscription issue, contact support directly, and they'll take care of your financials. So we can't do the financials in the forums, but they can do it through email in regards to your account. So that's just the things that you need here to interface with Fantasy Grounds. And if you need help or anything, check this stuff out. It's right in front of your face. It's right here. It's not hard. You just read a little bit and you can see what's going on. The other thing is the community I'm involved with is the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Teach a lot of GM-facing content creation, that sort of thing. So if you are curious about Fantasy Grounds and you don't have the time to put into it right now, you can always come over to the college after the holidays or the academy. Sign up for some of our lessons. Next month, we are having a full month of Traveler 2 from Mongoose. And that's going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot of guests. We got Seth Skorkowski. We got the developer from Smiteworks. We have some community makers that create content for like maps and stuff. So it's going to be a really cool month. And then after that, in February, we're going to do Mapper's Delight, which is a cartography summit. And then in April, we're planning on doing an April Aliens Day, which would be 4/26. In April. So that's a Tuesday. All right. So once you're done with the loading and you got your account set up, first thing you're going to want to do is create a new campaign. So this doesn't necessarily have to be a game that you're playing in, but I would create a start campaign where you just kind of use it to preview stuff, or maybe you use it to create content. Not necessarily a campaign where you have people connected to the table. This would be kind of like your own personal area to work. So I'm going to create a session for myself. I'm going to click on the rule set. So regardless of the platform here, you can, or regardless of the rule set, this process is very similar. I'm going to pick the DnD5e Ruleset. That's one I'm most comfortable with, but there are others in here. I'm going to name the campaign. So I'm going to call this the DM GM 101. And then I'll just say Christmas edition or something like that, just so I can differentiate. So I know I got about 50 different other ones called something similar. So that's just the title of the session. You can call it whatever you want. Try to avoid hyphens and weird punctuation. I don't know if that affects the title too much, but I know it can mess with Fantasy Grounds. Over here on the right, if you want to password protect it, you can do that. I'm just going to put a bogus password in there. If the game master, if you want to change your name and not use your actual username, because that's what it will default to, I'm going to go ahead and put Layron here, and because that's my username anyways, and then I'll put GM in front of it. So when the chat window is active in Fantasy Grounds, it'll say GM Layron, but you can put whatever you want there. So you can connect basically through either the cloud service, which is usually up all the time, and it'll tell you on the top left if you're connected to the lobby. And then you can set whether it's a LAN connection, which would be your local area network, direct IP connection, or you can do a private one that's still hosted on the cloud, but it's not visible to the public. And then you can also do just a private session where you're going to just share or really just have nothing. So I'm going to put mine on LAN because I'm not going to publish this particular adventure to be available for people to connect to. And then you have an option here to put extensions on. Until you get familiar with Fantasy Grounds, I wouldn't use a lot of extensions, but one of the things you'll notice are the themes. If you purchase the art pack, you'll have a lot more themes to pick from. But in this case, I'm just going to leave it themeless. I'm going to leave the vanilla default screen. I'm not going to add any themes to it. That also adds just a tiny bit of overhead to the platform. So if you're struggling with your RAM or your memory, that might be something you want to think about. And the only other extension I'm going to load today is the actual font that I want to see. So this font is a third-party extension. It allows for you to make the fonts just a teeny bit bigger in the chat window. It doesn't change the character sheets and story entries as much. It's more the chat window itself. But I'm going to go ahead and click this one, and this is on the Fantasy Grounds Forge, which is community created content. That's about all I'm going to load. I don't want to load a bunch of other stuff. I don't want to confuse you, but when you're using extensions and third-party content, it's better if you know the product a little bit, or at least get a little bit of exposure before you start loading in on these, because some of these can conflict and go out of date very easily. So just be careful about that. Okay, so the next thing is I'm going to hit start. And what you'll notice is you'll have a little bit of a load time depending on how much content that you purchase or that you own. So if you own a lot of content, it might take a minute or two to load that content up. Hey, Rob, what's up? So the main thing that you want to keep in mind when you have people connecting to your table is it's better, or at least, I guess, suggested that you are on a actual Ethernet connection. So if you have people that connect to your table with wireless and such, they might have some issues connecting or staying connected because of the signal quality. So Fantasy Grounds doesn't work on a tablet or a phone or a satellite connection. You really need to have a good solid internet connection, especially if you're the host. And that's only a suggestion. You can do whatever you want, but a lot of people complain. They say Fantasy Grounds sucks. Well, it's usually the user's connection that has the problem, and the game master might have a little bit too much stuff loaded, pushing that through to your table. So Fantasy Grounds Unity is more modern. It is 64-bit, but it does have some memory issues when it comes to sharing too much content. And a lot of that's bandwidth. So even if you have a really good internet, your upload speed times, whatever, are divided by the things that are basically connected to your table. So if you share a map that's not built in Fantasy Grounds, it's third party, it's going to multiply the memory of that map times the number of players. So you just got to remember to kind of keep lean if you can, at least until you can get your mind wrapped around the interface. So this is the new interface over here on the right. These buttons have changed recently. But what you'll be faced with at this point is your campaign setup. Now, some of the stuff I'm going to show you assumes that you at least have the core books, but if you don't, you can load the SRD, which is a system reference document, and the basic. So I'll show you that. So if we go into the user manual, there's some links right here for that. And on the bottom here, it says show on load. So if you don't want this to come up every time you start this particular session, you can click that little bubble there, and this won't pop up again unless you go into the options. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. So as I said before, if you have any core modules or the basic modules that you purchased, you can load those here. Or if you don't have anything right now, you can click the SRD, which is a 5th edition system reference document. Not all rule sets have an SRD. Some of them have a OGL, kind of real basic information. I think Pathfinder has it, and a couple of the other rule sets. Some of the rule sets you cannot access at all unless you buy the rule set. So there's not a whole lot you can do about that. I think Vampire might be one of them, so you don't really have the menu item unless you actually buy the rule set. So it just depends on how it's licensed and the type of content it is. But usually Starfinder, Pathfinder, Savage Worlds, D&D, all those pretty much have some sort of startup information. So this will basically confirm that you've loaded the basic items here on the right. And these are free. These come with the base program. And then there's the basic rules, which is basically a pared down version of the player's handbook, and also the some little bit of data from like the monster manual and the DM's guide. So those are the free things that come with Fantasy Grounds. So even if you don't have any books or content, that is a way to kind of get started, to kind of look around, poke around. But you are very limited, just kind of let you know right up front. However, once you master Fantasy Grounds and you really get familiar with it, you can start building your own content. Just going to take you a little bit to get to that point, but once you do, you'll be on your way. A lot of people build off of the SRD. So if you want to build a custom world and you plan on selling it, they'll use the SRD as a guideline, but they'll put all their own content in. So that's what the SRD is good for that too. So once you have this loaded, this will have these confirmed checks here. And as I said before, you can click on the 5e core rules if you own any of it. So if you have the player's handbook or the monster manual or the dungeon master's guide, it will load those. So I'm going to go ahead and click that because I do have those in my library, and I'll show you that shortly. So while those are loading, if there's any initial questions or anything about Fantasy Grounds, I'm willing to take those. Got some people in the chat, looks like, that are experienced with this. So you got Rob in here. Drake looks like he stopped by. I think Bella might stop by later. This is just a helpful video, kind of a Christmas bonus gift for you guys that are just getting started. When you start using Fantasy Grounds, you'll eventually want to seek for more. You'll want more information, or maybe you're getting frustrated or something. There's a really supportive community. We have other communities other than the Academy that are usually willing to help you out. I think that the hands down, the Fantasy Grounds Academy and all the other communities that kind of grew up around us are really good. You got the Pug server, the Fantasy Grounds pickup game server. Rob Tui is definitely a patron. We have a lot of others that are very similar that are either making content, publishing, or hosting games. So there's a ton of things out there. You just got to know where to look. So I'm waiting for the 3 main books to load. Part of the issue here for me is that I have so much content that Fantasy Grounds has to scour through my hard drive to load everything. So this load time will not be the same load time that you experience depending on how much content you have. So I'm loading quite a bit of extra stuff, or it's taking longer because it has to go through my entire library. If you have a very lean system and you're just starting out, you usually don't have to wait so long for the content to load. So that's just a patience thing. So while it's doing that, you can work on other things, check other things out. I wouldn't do this while people are connecting to you, because it really bogs down when you have people, when they're first starting to log in. They're pulling all the data from your table, and as you're trying to load things, it can really bring things to a crawl. So it's better if you have this up first and then have everyone connect. All right, so the basics are loaded. These are confirmed. I'm going to go ahead and close the confirmation window and hit next. And when you get to this window here, this is the options window. If you click on options, it will bring up the options window dialog, which we'll talk about that later. And once you're done, you can hit finish. So if you want that window to come back up again, and you've selected to not have it come up, in the options area, you can pick the setup button and it'll bring you right back to the beginning. So it kind of creates a loop. The next thing here is you can set up your message of the day. So if you want to set up a welcome message for your players when they log onto the table, this can be a summary of your last game, or you can put links in here to the last map you were on. You can do all kinds of things with this. So it takes text and links. And you can set this up and change it before your party joins a table, or you can just leave it like a generic greeting. But this happens to pop up when your players log into the table and they select their characters, and this will pop up. Some people just close it, they don't even read it. But if you want to use the message of the day, that's built into Fantasy Grounds. Token lights is a way that you can customize making lights for your game. I'm not going to go into this too much, but you can create your own custom things. Here are the details for just some basic things. If you open these up, these have the properties of those. But if you wanted to make like a campfire, fairy fire, all these different spell effects, you could technically make a library of those. But I won't cover that too much in detail right now. Let's see. So you have a currency button here where you can actually add or change currencies. You have your background decal. So right now I have the default Smiteworks one. So if you click background decal, it brings up a folder where all the decals are stored. So this is fairly new. That's why I'm in this area. If you previously had decals that were assigned from the actual games themselves, you can click on that and it will bring up the decals window or dialog box, and you can select your decal from there. If you were someone who had a decal that was custom, you have to go into your assets and go into your images assets, and you need to put a subfolder called images it's plural with an S, and that will basically give you more flexibility to add your own decals. So you have to have a subfolder in images called decals now. So this is just showing all the different decals that I have that come with some of the standard or the official content if you own it. So if you own one of the books, these will come up for you, provided that you have the content in your library and it's loaded. So these come with the modules and official content. So this is just a bunch of decals here. So if I wanted to use the player's handbook decal, I could click on that and that will assign it. If you don't like it or you want to change it, you can just hit clear, or you can select a different one. So that's a way that you select the decals now. So here's the Rise of Tiamat. Here's something that comes from Princes of the Apocalypse. So it really depends on what you own. So whatever content you have in your library that's official, the decals will be stored in a special vault that has all the decal images for your campaign setting or rulebook. Not all of them have decals, but most of them do. So these are just the options that you have if you're going to load any of these. So I think I'm good here. I don't know if I need to load one, but I do like this Kellic. Maybe I'll load that. This is from the original D&D toys. So if you click that, oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't even know that was in there. Okay, so I'll just click OK, and that sets your background decal. So you can add your own. You just have to have them in your asset. So that's pretty much all I'm going to do. And for languages, You can add your own language if you have a unique language in your world, or maybe you have a special homebrew race that you want to add in there. And what that does is it allows you to select the language in the chat window if that is something you want to do. So go ahead and close that. I'm going to close the options for now. I'm going to click on library, and I'm going to click on, you can either click modules, which is going to show your modules that you have loaded in your library. And then if you click activation, these are ones that are already activated. But if you click on activation, all of your other content in here is of choice for you to load. So I'm going to look for Lost Mine of Fendelver, which is a starting module. So I'm going to just type in Lost Mine, and it should bring up anything associated with that. So I have Lost Mine here, so I'm going to load that. That's a module that I recommend you get if you're just starting off and you don't have anything, no rule books or nothing. Just get that module. It's self-contained. You don't need a lot of content to run it. Comes with pre-gens. It's pretty good. Pretty good starting module. Once you click on this library over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see that you have a reference manual and then these links that go to the other sections of the modular view for Fantasy Grounds. The reference manual is the actual book. So if you click on the reference manual, you will notice you'll get this pop-up reference window. This is where your actual book is. So if you buy one of the rule books and you click on reference manual, this is the actual book. So if I click on the introduction and start going through these are links, shortcuts that take you to different sections in the book. You can go to part 1 or chapter 1, click through here. So all the art, the links, dialogue, all the tables, encounters, and stuff are all linked in here. So technically, you can just use Fantasy Grounds like a library and take this around with you. So you can portably take Fantasy Grounds out and take it camping, or you can use it for any type of event where maybe you don't have internet, but you still want to have your content. So if you don't have a way to access the internet, like if you have D&D Beyond and you're up camping and you don't have signal, you're not getting to your content very easily unless you pack up all your books and dice. So Fantasy Grounds kind of gives you a nice way to contain all that into one package. It's very self-contained. One of the things I would have done or like to do is take a couple batteries and maybe a 17-inch laptop and a charger and bring it up camping with me and just print off my character sheets before we go and give everyone physical dice. You can actually run Fantasy Grounds like a library and a tool. You don't have to have people connected to you, and just use it to run your campaigns and organize your data. There is a roller, an integrated dice roller in here, so you can use that. So if you pick up a dice and drop it in the chat window, that actually rolls the dice. However, if you have people with real dice, you can turn on the manual entry here for dice. And then when you pick up a dice and roll it, this would be basically you emulating your player, and then they would tell you what they rolled, or you could see it on the table. Let's say they rolled a 12. So if you put 12 in here, you confirm it, it'll put it in the chat, and if there's any math applied to it, or if it's attached to like a damage roll or something, it'll do all the calculations. So it's just a way that you can do manual dice entry if you need to. I know there are people out there running Fantasy Grounds as just a tool to run their game. So they got it mounted, they got their computer and they got a TV mounted inside of a table, or they might have somebody playing remotely that is playing online, and then their players or the rest of the people are sitting around a real table. Or like in this case that I'm describing, is I'd be up camping where I don't need any of that technology. I just need the laptop and the library, so I can run things. So you can look at your maps and everything. If you got a couple batteries, you can swap them out and charge them if you have a way to do it in your vehicle, or if you have power access. I think this would be a really good thing to take up camping, especially if you had like an RV or a motorhome or something like that. It'd be really fun. So that's just something you could do with Fantasy Grounds that's kind of unique. You're able to use it. It's self-contained. You don't have to rely on the internet. Of course, if you're going to play remotely, you do. But if you want to just use it like a library and to organize your notes and stuff, you can kind of use it like your notebook and all your books and binders into one interface, instead of having a whole bunch of sticky notes and 50 pounds worth of books and everything else. So it's kind of a cool way to do business as far as games go. A lot of the other services will require internet access unless you have a way to set up a server somewhere. So that's basically the reference manual and the library content. The other thing is the SRD and the basic rules are what comes with this, but I have some of the core rules. But if you just have Lost Mine of Phandelver, just that module, it's like $8 or $9. It's pretty cheap. You really don't need any of these, to be honest. You can run everything and then the SRD underneath it to kind of power it. Or the basic rules here would help. If you try to build characters with the SRD or the basic rules, unless you know how to input all your own data, you're very limited. So I just want to let you know up front. So I've seen people buy the base program and they think all the books come with it. No, you're getting the platform. You're getting the real core basic foundation for the 5th edition rule set, and you're getting some basic stuff, but you're not getting the monster manual, the player's handbook, or the DM's guide. Those are things that you do have to buy separately. One of the things that I hear quite often, and it just drives me bananas, is that you get someone who says, "Oh, well, I already have all the books. I'm not going to buy all that crap again." Well, it's true. You don't have to. You can actually kind of use it kind of hand in hand, but it helps to have at least the player's handbook in digital format, so it's easier for you to make characters and such, because if not, you're going to be entering a lot of that data by hand, and I think that's a real time-consuming process, especially when you're newer and you haven't been proficient with the tool, or you're just starting off. It can be a little annoying. So I recommend just getting at least the player's handbook, and then if you want, just enter everything else. But rule books are a little bit harder to put into Fantasy Grounds. You can do it, though. It is doable. One other thing I can mention about Fantasy Grounds, especially getting started, is a lot of Fantasy Grounds, you just do a lot of clicking and dragging, and when you need to update such, you're not having to load 50,000 different things necessarily. So it's a little bit more compact and self-contained. Whereas in other cases, if you're using something else, it might be a lot of extra work just to get to the game itself. So if you're the game master or developer, you might like Fantasy Grounds. You might appreciate the fact that most of the work's done for you. You're not having to load a dice roller, and you're not having to load another thing that makes the map look better. And when you start getting into all that, that's when you're going to be basically spending more time on the setup and the technology than actually running the game. So it's one balancing point with this platform, is that it does have the automation stuff, but there's enough here to where you don't have to set up a lot of that. It's not always necessary. So it depends on the rule set too. So not all rule sets are even. Some have automation, some don't. You just have to get used to the platform and the rules that you prefer, and you'll find all the strengths and weaknesses as you go. So this is the modules that I have loaded. When you want to manage these, I'm going to go to the activation window, and I'm going to load just the things that I have loaded in library. So that's kind of how you manage it. So there's a load filter that will only show the modules that I have loaded and active. So if I click the load filter, I'm going to go ahead and unload some of the content here. So I don't need the basic rules anymore. So that'll unload those. I don't really need the monster manual, because the Lost Mine of Phandelver module actually contains all the modules that you need, or all the creatures that you need. And honestly, the SRD bestiary is very similar. It's missing some of the monsters in the artwork, but the data is there. So if you need a monster manual, you don't have one, the SRD bestiary is good for that. So I'm going to go ahead and unload the D&D Dungeon Master's Guide, the players part. That gives you a couple more options for character creation. I don't plan on building characters, so I'll unload that. The Dungeon Master's Guide is kind of hit or miss if you really need it. For Lost Mine of Phandelver, not really. There are a couple other books that are similar. The starter kit for the Stranger Things box set and the D&D Essentials kind of have these kind of basic rules baked into them. And then Lost Mine of Phandelver. So those are your three like starting sets if you're going to start out if you're brand new to the platform. And then you have the Lost Mine of Phandelver module. I'll leave that. I'll leave the SRD data. Magic items, I don't really need that. They're already contained in the module itself. And then you have the player's handbook. So really, that's the minimal setup there. And honestly, you don't even need the player's handbook with the Lost Mine because it has characters in it. If you don't mind just using the pre-gens, just if you're going to play once or something like that, you don't have to have all those other books. So this is the real minimal basic setup. So Lost Mine is like $10. If you get the subscription, that's like $5. And you have that for 30 days. So you can use that to try out the platform before you invest in all this other stuff. So it's a good way to get started without spending a lot of money. So if you do the $5 a month and this module, that's like $15. So that's not too bad. Obviously, if you like it and you start getting into it, you learn how to use the platform, then obviously you'll probably want to expand or upgrade. But I think $15 entry is pretty good. Because when you download the demo, you're already going to get these two bestiaries and such, and then the Lost Mine is self-contained, and some of the other starter box kits I think are like $20. So it's not bad to start off with like $15. That's pretty reasonable. Driving to visit mom south of Atlanta. Cool. Hey Shmo, what's up, man? All right, so the next thing is let's take a look at how the data is organized in Fantasy Grounds. So I showed you the reference manual, which gives you basically a way to access the content. So you have your pre-gens section up here, which not very many modules have. It's just those starter kits. And what this does, I'm going to close the reference manual module book, but if you want to bookmark the reference manual for anything, you can drag and drop the link. So this link up here where it says reference manual, this little shield, I'm going to single left click on it, drag and drop it into one of these blank panels down here, which is your shortcut keys. And that way I don't have to come back to this window again. I can just close this. So that's pretty handy. So for characters, you can use the pre-gens that come with the module, so you don't have to spend hours and hours building characters unless that's what you're trying to do. So if you click on player and bring up the character section, this is where you would start a new character or start the character wizard to build your own content or to make a character. I'm going to just add these pre-gens to the campaign so I don't even have to do character creation. So I'm just going to click this green plus button. And what that does is it adds it to your campaign from the module itself. So it's just making a copy of the pre-gens over to your character selection window. Once you've done that, when your players join the table, if you have any players, they will be able to select these. But once it's selected, it kind of takes it out of the pool. So that if one of your players comes on and they want the cleric, and they click on it to read what it has and everything, they're going to have to release that back to the pool if they don't want this character. If you don't, what will happen is one person will come on, they'll click on all 5 of these, and then they go, oh, okay, well, I only want this one, but then you have ownership of all 5 of them. And that means all the other players won't be able to select them. So you have to right-click on it and release the character if you're the player to allow others to access the characters. So that's something that I think people kind of get confused about when they're just starting. You can build your own characters, but I'm not going to actually get into that. But building characters is very paramount to playing Fantasy Grounds, especially if they're created poorly or if they're not built correctly or whatever. You're not going to really be able to take advantage of the automation and the full power of the platform if you don't understand how these go together. So that could be something a little bit irritating at first until you get the hang of it. So my suggestion there is to practice building characters, get used to it, get some third-party content to increase the efficiency and the usage of the platform, and then it really makes the game a lot more fun. It makes it a little bit quicker and a lot less brain work. So that is basically the start of this. So once the players have, once they claim these characters, when these pop up for them, they'll have access to the character sheets. There is a portrait window over here on the left. What I find is that this can take a long time if you're, trying to do this on your own as a game master. So what I do is I'll take these character sheets and I'll stack them like a deck of cards here. And what this does is it gives me access to all of them. I can close this window. And instead of collecting and selecting a portrait on each one of these character sheets, I will actually go into my assets folder in the library and click on portraits. And then you have folders and subfolders, and you can even add your own folders with portraits. So I'm going to pick the Fantasy Grounds Fantasy portrait folder because I want to access that. And when you do that, you're going to get this window pop up and you're going to have access to all these different images for default images. You can make your own custom ones, but I'm just kind of showing you. It's easier to do it this way than to select if you click on the character sheet and it will pop up this portrait select, and then you'll be able to do the same thing. But what this does is it keeps this window active and open, so you don't have to do that individually for each character sheet. So I have a Dwarven Cleric here, so I'm going to drag and drop this portrait on that character. I close that. So this is a human fighter. So I'll find something that looks similar to that. So I click the arrow, go to the next group, see if I can find any humans. So here we go. That's a dwarf. Human dwarf. How crazy is that? A human dwarf. Okay. Let's see. Here we go. So this is a folk hero. So it doesn't even have to be male. So let's make it a girl or a female. So let's see. What do we got here? Okay, here we go. Human female. So she's a folk hero. And this particular character relies more on a bow. Then we got a rogue, like a halfling or something like that. So I can come through here and just kind of pick these. So if you do this individually, it takes a little bit longer to keep clicking and opening and closing the selection window. That's why I'm doing it this way. So I'll just open up the assets and go straight to the assets folder. This makes this part of it easier for me. So if you're setting up for a game, this will definitely be a lot easier on you. So there's a human noble here. So I'm going to grab this human noble looking guy with his helmet. Maybe he's got some good armor or something. And then you have a wizard acolyte, which I think will be a female character that I might use. Let's see, where did she go? All right, so this is going to be my wizard. And then there was the little gnome dude that I wanted to use for the actual halfling. And it's not too many choices here, but I'll just use this little gnome guy. Kind of looks like a halfling. There we go. So that's basically just selecting your portraits. Now your players will do this individually, but if you need to get set up and you don't want to dink around too much, I just assign them ahead of time. You can give them the choice to do that, depending on how much time you want to put into it. But that actually took more time than anything else, and that's why I showed you that method, because it can really slow things down when you're goofing around, unless you got the time and you're not too worried about it. Managed to get the One Ring starter box all but out in Fantasy Grounds last night. Excited to play it. Yeah, that sounds cool, man. All right, so the next step is we got the characters. We're kind of getting set up right now. There's a good practice to keep in Fantasy Grounds when you're laying out your table. So the first thing is this chat window. You can move this. So if you right click on here, there's a little eraser so you can clear any text if you want. And then if you right click and unlock it, you're able to move and drag this anywhere you want. So I'm just going to bring this over here. This is something that the digital Dungeon Master taught me a long time ago when I first started. Is watched his videos, and he kind of gave me an idea about this layout. The other thing is you can change the color of the dice. So I want to go ahead and lock the window first. The dice right now are kind of this green color. So if you go to the interface on the top right, pick colors, you can change this by selecting the color you want. So I want this kind of purplish color. And there it is, kind of matches the cursor I have. So I'm kind of theming that. And I go ahead and hit OK. You can change the color of the text to black or white. I'm going to leave it as white. And then when you roll the dice, it'll change the color. So players can also do that on their end. It helps to differentiate who's on the table. When you have a spell effect or a circle or where you draw lines, they'll correspond to the dice color that the player picked. So now that I have the chat window where I want it, now I'm going to bring up the combat tracker. And the combat tracker is your next important piece here. So the chat window, the combat tracker, these are your friends. These are something you're going to be using a lot. Stretch this out to where you have a little bit of room for your players and for your encounters, your monsters and such. Try to give it as much room as you can without covering the chat window. You really only need this little portion down here. So I'm just kind of using that as an example. But basically, this combat tracker window can't go any more narrow because of the icons. If you scrunch it up anymore, it will hide the icons here. And conversely, the chat window can go as far as you want it. But I usually line it up with the right-hand side of the combat tracker. And near the top here, on the top left, is where the player tokens will show up when they connect to the table. So that's all I'm doing right now is setting up the table. Now, some of you might need a dice tower or you want to use one. So if you go to the options, there is a place in here where you can turn on the dice tower. So where it says table dice tower, you turn that on. It'll turn it on for the people that are connected to you, but you won't necessarily see that because by default, when you drop the dice in the chat window as a game master, you are only going to see the roll. It's not going to be displayed to the players. And this little eyeball with a line through it is your indication that it's a private roll. However, if you also want to use the dice tower like your players, you have to click on Chat Show GM Rolls on. What that does is it tells Fantasy Grounds to display your rolls in public, but it also turns on the visibility for the dice tower for the Game Master. So if I right-click and unlock it, I can move it under here and kind of store it there and lock it. And this is the position it's going to be in. I'm going to fix the chat window a little bit so it's not riding over it too much. There we go. So this is just a way to organize your table. That's all I'm doing right now. And now they're locked, so I can't move these windows anymore. And these are like some of the only few windows that can actually do that. All the other ones are free-floating. So once I have the dice tower, now if I drop the dice in there, it's actually going to show the roll in private, but it's from the dice tower. So this allows for players to roll dice where no one else can see the rolls except for the game master. So that's might be a storytelling tool, or might be a reason why you have to do it. Some rule sets you don't need dice towers and stuff, so you obviously wouldn't turn that on. So that's just a feature that comes in the core rules. Now, see, if I have this reference manual now, I can bring this up and I can start reading the module. I can do some research before I run the adventure. I can even run it from this reference manual if I wanted to. So that's why I have the shortcut down here, so I don't have to dig into the menu to find anything. So the next step is kind of understanding how the data is related. So I have in the library, I just have the modules loaded for Lost Mine. I have the bestiary, and then I have the data, which is the real core stuff. So what I'll do here is I'm going to go ahead and click on campaign. And these are all the different groups that Fantasy Grounds offers for your campaigns. Now, not every campaign will have every single one of these bits of data, but how these are related is you'll have a story entry, which is the heart of everything. So that'll be kind of like the middle or the chest piece. Then you have the images, which is your visual stuff, like your maps, your handouts, those sort of things. So those are usually the two most commonly accessed things. Now, this other stuff is what kind of makes up the encounters and the items and that sort of thing. So I'm going to pop up NPCs, so that's non-playing characters. That could be monsters, it can be traps, it can be vehicles. Basically anything that can take damage or give damage is an NPC. So if you want to create NPCs for hazards and that sort of thing, you can for this particular rule set. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on the encounters because it's kind of related. So the encounters are made up of NPCs. Encounters in Fantasy Grounds makes it easier for you to award experience points and keep track of groups of encounters and such. So that's a pretty nice way to handle it. The next is the items. So this is all your weapons, armor, magic items, even service items. They don't necessarily have to be physical objects, but basically non-coins. So this would be gemstones, anything like that that's not a coin. Coins in Fantasy Grounds are just numbers. They don't normally count as weight unless you have an extension that forces that. But basically, this is all your items and such for your campaign. So that's just a group here where all that's stored. And then you have parcels, which is basically another way of saying treasure, like your treasure chest or a group of items. So for the items, they can be included in parcels. Parcels can be coins, gems, it can be items, basically a collection of wealth or a collection of things that can be used. And those have both text for the actual coins, which are just numbers, and then there's the actual links to the items that would be embedded into the parcel. So if I open up this cave entrance one, there's the boots of striding and springing, and then you can have coins over here, and what these are just linked in here. So when you go to award this to your players in the party sheet, it's a lot easier. And I'll show you the party sheet shortly. So those are the main data points, and then you have your tables, which allows you to generate content. You can make random encounters. You can have it set up an elaborate thing where several tables roll on several things to generate things. A lot of power in tables if you know what you're doing. I recommend keeping them simple in the beginning until you get the hang of it, but you technically could nest quite a few tables together and create some pretty incredible outcomes depending on what you got going on. The next thing is the actual quest items. So these are your milestones, your goals. These are things like rescue the princess. You get 1,000 experience points, and then that gets divided amongst a group of 5 or 6 people. So this is an easy and convenient way to track non-combat or non-encounter related things. So it doesn't mean you won't be fighting. It just means that you don't have a direct correlation between an encounter and the actual experience points. This is a way to kind of a blanket reward for a task or a goal or a milestone or something like that. So this might work well with Adventure League, things that don't really rely on experience points so much, more on completing tasks and such. So those are your different components. So if you think about this, you got 2 arms, 2 legs, the body and the head. This is what the robot, as we call it. So this is kind of gives you an idea of how it's organized. The next thing you need to wrap your mind around is that each one of the books that I have loaded will probably have one or more of these segments in them. So right now, all of these are set to all, which means that it's going to show everything in the library. So in the modules, it's showing everything that I have loaded. So if you want to get a little bit more focused and less distracted, you can drop these groups down. You can select the bestiary if you want, or in this case, we're going to do Lost Mine of Vendelver. And then for the encounter, same thing. This one's broken up into sections. So I only care about the first encounters for the chapter 1 for right now. So I selected that. For tables and such, these don't really come up until part 3 in the module. You don't need them right now, but I wanted to show you that they're here in this case, and they'll be coming up later on in the adventure. For quest items, the same thing. You have all these different quest items that you will complete throughout the adventure. I have it to Lost Mine of Fendelver because that's the module we're using. Same thing with parcels. Here's all the treasure that's in the module, or most of it. And then for the story entries, it's kind of the same thing, but you have an intro, then you have all these chapters. I'm going to leave the story entry up for now because I'm going to show you something with that shortly. And then you have the images, which in this case, it's broken up into a few different places. So you have Lost Mine of Phandelver artwork. You have the maps. You have the monsters, so you can see the pictures of them, and the magic items. So they gave you all the images, but they broke them up into groups. So for right now, I'm just going to leave it on the artwork for the module. So you got the cover and some of the images that are baked into the actual module. So I'll go ahead and leave that out for now. And then your items are generally broken up. You have these filters on top, so you can go for armor or weapons or some templates, so you can use the forge as the game master. That kind of breaks it out into groups, but then you can also change this over to Lost Mine. There's broken into two groups. So there's regular mundane items, and then there's magic items. So I'll just do the mundane stuff, just kind of give you an idea what it looks like. So those are all the different pieces that make up a module. Not everything is going to have something or an entry in it. Depends on the module and how large the scope is. So some modules that get off the DM's Guild may not have all these groups. So it just depends. Like some people don't put in the quest items if it doesn't need it, or maybe there's no parcels or whatever. So it depends on the content. It's a map module. You might just have story entries, maps, and maybe some tables. You wouldn't have necessarily quest items and stories and such. So that is just a kind of a brief overview of how the data is arranged and how it's organized. The next step is to actually get prepared and set up for your campaign. So there are some things that you want to enable, and there are things that you want to get set up before you run your campaign for session 0. One of the things you want to do is get familiar with the party sheet, which is an overview of your group. And once your players connect and you have all your players on the combat tracker, then put them on the party sheet as well. So I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to go to the characters area or player and click on characters. These are all the characters that are a part of our campaign. So I'm going to drag and drop each one of these into the combat tracker. And then so far there is not a way to do it all at once. So you just have to drag them over individually. So once they are on there, now you want to add them to this party sheet. You do that by grabbing this little link over here on the right hand side. And what this does is it adds them to the party sheet. The party sheet is a way to track the group as a whole. And there's other tabs on there. So there's an inventory tab where you can manage and view the inventory that they have on hand. And this is also when you award the parcels where the coins and the items and all that stuff comes in here. Then you have an order tab, which you can set up for a watch order just by assigning a number. And then you can use this marching and formation area if you don't have a map. Right now, it doesn't show a grid or anything, but if you right-click on it, go to Layers, and click on Set Grid, and you just left-click and hold the mouse button down. Once you do that, wait a few seconds. It will pop up because you're basically adding a grid to it now, and that will allow you to set your own grid. So again, I went to the grid area in this marching and formation, did right click, go to Layers, go to Set Grid, and I'm just going to single left click and drag. And what that does is it draws a square out for you. And then once you put a player on here, that grid will show up. So you can use this as a rough map that you're going to use for your campaign if you don't have one. So this is kind of like the old days when you're using pen and paper and you're going to use the content like you would around a table. It's really nothing fancy. You just have a way to show or illustrate where they are in relation to each other. So that's a good use for this. I also use it for height and depth. So if you have a flying character, you might define which is the ground and can say one of these squares is 20 feet instead of 10 feet. It's up to you, but this is a quick and dirty map that you can use. The experience points tab is where you can take a look at their overall experience, how many is required to level up, and then over here is where you award the combat encounters and the quests. So when I brought up those groups earlier, depending on what you're working on, those would be assigned in here, and then you would click award, and it would split the experience points evenly amongst the party. So that's how that works. Hey, Bell, what's up? So that's just a kind of a way to get started with the party sheet and get that set up. That's probably your second step here. And of course, have all your players on the combat tracker. So the next step is to organize the data that you're going to use for your next session. So I'm going to do a session 0. It's really not the adventure itself. It's just kind of an introduction. It's where the players can talk about their character sheets. Everyone kind of gets together, introduce each other, just kind of get used to getting connected to the table. You might even do a couple of these before you actually start your game. So that's important. It's probably the most valuable thing you can do is kind of have a practice session or session 0. One of the things I like to do as a GM is organize that, at least that first session, so you know what's going on. So one of the things I've found is that if you open up all the character sheets, especially for new players, and you stretch these out like this, you're going to get the full length of the character sheet, and you're going to be able to see what exactly you need to look at if you need to help your players. So that's one of the things I do for myself is I'll get each one of these things out, and I'll stretch them out so that I'm not having to move them, and I'll leave them stacked up here in this section so that if I need to refer to the character sheets, it's right here. Now, if I have experienced players, I don't have to do this as much, but it's just mainly newer folks. When they need help, I can look to see what they're trying to do in a sense of what they have available. I can't see them moving their mouse or anything, but I can see their character sheet. I can discuss it with them. So that's what I normally do to get this kind of so I can see them, but they're not bouncing all over the place. You're not moving them. So one of the biggest mistakes that I think newer users get into, including myself, is that I'll drag this window over here if I need the space behind it. Let's say it was here and I want to see the center of the screen. You end up moving it over there and leaving it, and then you'll close it. Well, the next time you bring up that window or that character, what's going to happen is it's going to go where you left it. So the idea is to place things where you want them and leave them there. And if you have to close them, you can close the box, no problem. But if you drag it out of the way and then close it, it's going to reappear in the wrong place more than likely. The other nice thing about doing that, placing the windows ahead of time, is when you click on the shortcuts, the player characters or your data windows will go right where you left it. And that's a huge realization when you get into playing Fantasy Grounds and you start understanding that. It really makes things easier. Is what people will tend to do when they first start is that they're going to freak out and panic because they keep moving windows around and covering other things, and that's really frustrating. So my suggestion is to lay it out this way, at least until you get used to the interface. And then when a player's turn comes up, when you're actually playing this, let's say this fighter folk hero, she's probably somewhere in the stack, but if I want to bring up her sheet, I just click on the little pin on the right-hand side, and it brings it right up to the front. And then I can click on her Actions tab to see what she's got going on. So that's a really convenient way to manage your windows, is once you place the content, you just leave it there, and then the next time you bring it up, it's going to go where you left it. So you're kind of setting this thing up like a template in a way. And then when you're done, if you're concerned about your layout, you can do /save in the chat window, hit enter. It'll save your data. Normally, Fantasy Grounds will save every 5 minutes, but a lot of stuff can happen in 5 minutes. So if you're worried about that, I do a /save and hit enter, and that will forcibly save the campaign data. That way, if it crashes or you move something or break something, you have a starting point. So that's just a tip there on the character sheets, or even NPCs. So if you put monsters in here in the combat tracker, I do the exact same thing. I lay them all out in this area first. And we'll get to that shortly. So I was talking about the content that I was going to look at. So this is going to be Lost Mine of Phandelver. So there is a way that you can organize your content a little easier in Fantasy Grounds to make it simpler to digest and access. And it does add a little bit of understanding and organization to your methods. So this isn't something you have to do. This is just a way that I prefer to do it. This is what I teach people to do, at least when you're first starting. So on the top right, there's a calendar button. Most people, I don't know if they use this or not, but some people might, but you can use the calendar to keep track of in-game stuff, or you can even use it to kind of set up for your campaigns. It's all kind of contained in Fantasy Grounds. You can't export it to Google or anything like that, but it is part of the interface. So it's not turned on by default because some people don't even use it. So if you click on modules, it'll bring up the Fantasy Grounds modules window. And if you go to the search field and just type calendar or part of the word, you'll notice that there is the calendar here. If you click load, that will bring up all these options where you can actually bring up a calendar. So depending on what world you're in, you have Ravnica, you have the Third Imperium from Traveler, you have Galifar for Eberron, Barovia for Ravenloft. So there's a lot of different supported rule sets. There's Harptos for the Forgotten Realms. You have the calendar of Tyr for Dark Sun, so on and so forth. I'm just going to pick the Gregorian calendar. That's a standard calendar that we normally use from day to day. Once you pick the calendar, it becomes like your campaign calendar. If you disable it, you'll lose your work on it. So it depends on, if you're going to use it, activate it and you'll keep it that way. You can't switch between calendars, at least not without doing a bunch of extra work. So the calendar is basically just a way to organize your information. So first thing you do is set the year. In this case, it'll be the actual year that we're in, so 2021. And what that does is it reshuffles this calendar so that it's correct for the days of the week. And then the era would be AD in this case, but if you had a game world, you'd obviously put that in here. To manipulate the time, you just click in the cell where the time is. You hold down the right control key and you mouse forward or backwards. And that advances the time, or it would decrease the time, and it switches between AM and PM. You can't type that in. You have to actually advance this tool. So if you were going to meet at 11:30, let's say, you can click in these fields, use the right control key, and mouse forward or backward to advance the clock. And now we're going to set the day. So today is the 24th of December, so that's down here. So if I double click, that's going to select the day that I want to put a calendar entry in here, which is like a journal. And then I will click this arrow, which will set the actual calendar date. So now it's Friday 24th, and here's the time. And then you have these chat bubbles, if you want, where you can send the information out to the chat area. Maybe it's something game related. You want to use that to kind of to mark what's going on in the game. I'm just using this as a reference, but you have two fields here. You have a game master and the player. So these two groups allow the GM to organize like a journal or a library. The players can only see the player field. They can also put notes in there. So for right now, I'm going to put session 0. And then down below, I'm just going to repeat that. So this is just notes that you're going to use for your session. And that's basically the first calendar entry that I have. And then if you wanted to, you can drag the text. So you can say, okay, we did it at this time. And then the date, you can put that in there if you want. So it just depends on what information you want. So I just took the text from the chat and drug it up here. And I might do the same thing with the game master's information. So it's just a way to collect data and keep track of things. The other thing I like to do as a game master is I'll use my notes button here, which is something that everyone can do. The notes are private. GM can see all notes, but the players can only see their own notes unless you share. If you make it public, then they can see your notes. There's a little button here that says public. In this case, I'm not going to make this public, but I am going to call this session 0. So session 0, and to label it, I'm going to put 00.00. It's just a good habit to get in so that these things come down in order when you start getting more than one entry. So that's basically the first notes that I'm going to set up. I'm going to link the journal entry from the calendar to the notes. So that gives me a direct link to the calendar or the journal entry. And then I'm going to do vice versa here. In the journal entry, I'm going to drag my notes into there, and that's going to give me my notes for this session. So it's going to form like a bunch of links and things that are linked together so you can keep track of what you're doing. So this would be for session 0. So I'm going to go ahead and close that for right now. And the reason I did it back and forth is when you open up this window here, if you accidentally close this session 0 window, you can easily click on it again and bring it back. So it's nice and handy to link things back and forth, especially if you get lost and you're newer to the interface. So that's just a suggestion. You don't have to do all this extra stuff, but it really does help organize things. The next thing I do is I'll come over here and I will put all my players on this notepad, but because it's easier for me to access and it's all in one place. So what I'm going to do is just call this group or this little section here, I'll call it players, just so I have like a header. And I'm going to drag and drop all the players onto this sheet here so that when I come back here, I can find them easier and I don't have to mess around too much. So I'm going to go ahead and drop all the characters on here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to put some notes here. It makes them easier to access, and it organizes the table a little bit more. So that's all the players right there. And then what I'll do is I'll put, let's say this is Sam, and this next person is Indigo 77. You know, so this is or Ingogo 77. So these are ways that, you know, if you have Discord name or email address or phone number, that's where I'd put this data. And then for the group section, I'm just going to make that a header. So I did that by selecting the text and hitting Control-2, and that made this a bold kind of header thing. So that's just an organizational tool that I've learned over the months and years that I've been using this. It kind of helps keep everything grouped together. And when you first start your table, all this stuff's going to be closed. So when you unless you have the Windows Saver. So when you first log in, it's going to look like this. And I'm going to have this note thing down here in my group here so that I don't lose it. And when you come onto the table, the first thing you're going to see is that. You're going to say, okay, there's nothing on here. So if you bring up your notes, it's going to pop up where you left it. And you can bring up all the character sheets, just like that. And then you can even take the combat tracker button and link it to this start sheet. So if you want to make that part of your routine, you can actually unlock this, and I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to take the combat tracker and link it right to this so that that's the first thing I click on when I come to the table is that combat tracker. It'll bring that up and then go right down the row with all the players. So it's kind of like a load list. There are extensions that'll kind of do this for you too. I do it manually, so I have more control over it, and it keeps everything cleaner, and I don't want to add unnecessary things if I don't need to. So that's just a quick and dirty way to make that simpler for you. Now, if you wanted to change options, you can also do that as well. So maybe there's some default options that you want to have. So if I go to the options area, all of these little links over here are draggable now, and you can make shortcuts out of them. So one of the things I want to do is shortcut the reference manual. So I can actually drag that link up to this area, and it will put the link in there, provided I drag it to the right place. So if I go to reference manual, and I'm going to drag this over to this area up here, there's my reference manual, and I'm going to label it as Lost Mine of Phandelver so I know which reference manual it is. And then for any settings, let's say if you want to change any settings or turn them on and off, let's say the movement, you want to change it from standard to variant, you can actually drag this over and make that part of your settings that you're going to use. And that's basically the command for it. But you can put that in the chat or the shortcut. So if I wanted to go to diagonal distance or whatever, I can change that and use that as a shortcut below. So that's what that does, is it gives you the dice command shortcut, and you don't have to try to remember that. You can just put all your options down below in your chat area so that it's easier for you. So that's just a way to make things a little easier for you. The next step is going to do my research. So I'm going to put research for the game. And I'm going to go back to the campaign area, and I'm going to select the story entries because that's where I'm going to do my first foray into this. So this is the Lost Mine of Phandelver beginning part. It's like the index, the starting areas, that sort of thing. So this allows for anyone that wants to do some research to kind of read through this. So there's a background which is going to explain why things are the way they are. And one of the things you want to do with these is start to put them in a size that you want. So I'm going to take this window here and put it in this area down here. I don't need it that wide. And what that does is every time I bring this up, it's going to come down right to the spot where I have it. You can scroll if you need to. You use the arrow keys to go to the next window. So I'm going to go ahead and put this background as part of my research. So that's one of the things I want. Then the overview is another one. So this is going to give you a rough idea of how the module runs. And then there's an adventure hook, which I'm also going to use to read, and it'll inspire me to make my own starting point. And then there is a Forgotten Realms area. If you've never played in the Forgotten Realms, you're not sure about the setting, there's a little bit of information on there. And there's this low resolution player map that I'm going to use to help me organize this. So I'm going to take this map and actually bookmark it as well as part of my research. And it's labeled. This is image, and then it'll say the Sword Coast. Now I'm going to go ahead and make this a header as well for my research. And then for these windows that I have all over the place, I want to get ready to start placing these. So I think for the time being, the interim, I'm going to leave this notes here and lock it, or I don't want to lock it yet, but I will. And then for the map itself, this particular map is oriented kind of in a vertical type situation. So I'm going to make a vertical window. And then if I unlock the map, I can actually use this toggle toolbar, click on the zoom to fit, and it will fit that window. And I can zoom in a little bit by using the mouse wheel. And then this doesn't have to be that tall vertically, so maybe like that. And then again, I can zoom in. And then that gives me an idea of where we're playing and that sort of thing. So what I like to do as a habit, and just something I do to help keep organized, is I'm going to link my notes to the starting point in the adventure if there is one. And then this map is already linked to the actual area here. So it just provides me with another way to get to my information, so I'm not constantly moving windows around. Now I'm going to leave the map where it is. I don't want to move it once I have it in position. And if I want to get back to this text behind it, I just click on the bar and it'll bring that forward. If I want to go back to the map, it'll bring that forward. So you don't even have to move those. You just have them where you need it, when you need it, to move the data windows. And then I might put this back here where I had it so that I have a home for it. So that's kind of where I want to be when I'm getting started, is just to have this layout, this information, to make it so much more, I would say, organized and not such a big mess, and you're not moving windows around. Because what'll happen is unless you have the Windows Saver extension or something that helps you organize your table, what you're going to get is, you're going to be moving stuff around, like this map. You'll have it over here, and then you'll close it. Well, if I click on the link for it, it's going to bring it up where I left it. So you want to leave it in a place where it's accessible and it's not going to cover something that you don't want it to. So that's something you got to get used to. On the story entries, if you click on them individually, they're just going to pop up in their default locations. So what you want to do with those is use the arrow keys, if you can, down at the bottom. So this is going to go from 5 to 6 to 7. And once you've done this a couple times and you've clicked on it, it's going to remember that. So then when you click on these links, they'll come up down there instead of in a separate window over the top of everything else. So get the first one linked, put all your links in here, and then use the arrow keys to switch pages. And when you do that, what will happen is, as you go through this, it will place it down below where you have the window. So you're not breaking it out in a whole separate box. Like if you have it placed somewhere in the wrong spot, that'll mess you up, and it'll aggravate you, because you're going to be constantly moving windows around. And that's what ends up happening is Windows management becomes an issue in Fantasy Grounds really quick, because kind of limited on space. The way that the windows work, you can really very easily get these things mixed up and covering each other and such. A lot of people say, well, why don't you just use another screen? Well, you can, but you can't truly have a breakout screen. You have to still use one window and stretch it, and then you can move them between two screens. But that's provided you have two screens and they're of similar or the same resolution. Otherwise, it doesn't look right. So having two screens is not always the answer. And as a matter of fact, most people use the second screen for Discord or for other apps. So I don't know if that's any better or not, but I kind of want everything contained and organized in one window. If you have to break it out, you can stretch Fantasy Grounds between two monitors, but it really doesn't help that much. So you can't break each one of these windows out separately. So it's all contained within the Fantasy Ground. So that's one thing that people tend to gripe about, or they wonder about it, and it's not a thing. There's no multi-monitor support at this point. And if you do use two monitors, you're basically stretching the program across two screens. And a lot of times you need that second screen for like Discord and that sort of thing. So it depends on your use. All right, so there's that. So that's my session 0. I mean, that's pretty much all I need to do. So I got my reading, I got my research to do, I got my characters on the combat tracker. One thing I forgot to do was come here to the party sheet and put that where I want the party sheet. So I'd probably just place it there, and when I call it back up, it's going to come up to where I left it. So I'm going to leave it there. And whenever I bring that up, that's where I want it to show up. I don't want it in some random place. So that's my biggest way to show you how to organize your table to make things a lot more simple and easier for you to work through, and it'll keep your frustration level down. The other thing is, if you're going to do a session 2 or session 1 in this case, I would close the notes here, go back to the character tab, the player tab, open up a new note, and do the same thing. So I'm going to create a new note. So this is going to be 01.00, and this is going to be session 1. And this is where the adventure is going to start. So I'm just going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to place this up here. I'm going to bring the notes from session 0, and what I'm going to do is transfer it over so that I don't have to to find it again. I'm going to steal the map from this other notes area because I want that still. I don't really need the players anymore. I probably have a pretty good idea of who's who. I'm going to start another calendar entry, and we're going to actually set our next session. So we decided as a group, as the party, we're going to play Sunday. So if I double click on Sunday, that's going to bring up a new journal entry. I'm going to change the calendar by setting the date. So that'll be the current date now. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag my notes in here. So my session 1 notes will go into this area here. And then this particular journal entry will be linked to this, and then this is already linked to the journal entry. So that will be dropped in here so that I can use this for another time if I need to reference it. And then I'm going to actually take the session 1 data and link it to Neverwinter because that's where we're going to start the adventure. And then lock it. So these are just, steps. And then I'll go to the story entry in the campaign. Just lost mine to Fandelver. I'm going to bring up the story. And I'm done with the first group. So now I'm going to go to the part 1. This is where all the part 1 adventures are. I'm going to start laying out what content I want to cover for the next session. So in this case, I'm going to use the index. I'm going to do the Goblin Arrows encounter, which is where it starts off. It actually tells you you're going to start off in Neverwinter, but you could start wherever you want. And then there's the ambush, which is the main thing, which is going to be the first fight. And then if you make it through there and you got the time, then you might go to the beginning or find the Kragma hideout. So that's all one session, right? So this is session 1 notes. And all I'm doing here is organizing for the next campaign. I'm not even really setting anything up yet. And that's basically the gist of it. And then I can actually go through session 2. And I can set all these up ahead of time. And then when I need to bring these up, they're already linked and ready to go. I might not have the calendar links. But then I'll go through and just read the content that I need. So, for instance, this is a story part 1. So if I come down here to the bottom and I switch this and I get going to the beginning of the adventure, so I got to go through, all these groups. That's the end of this section. So I want to go and put the index down there as my first story entry. I'm going to put it down here in this place of this. So I don't need that anymore. Let's go ahead and close that and drag this where I want it. And that's where I'm going to start this. And you just come through this area, and you can use the arrows to get through. No pun intended for goblin arrows, but you can use these bottom arrows to take you through the first 4 parts of this module. That's all you really have to read, and maybe one other section after that. But there's your homework right there for your next session. So it keeps it organized. Things are linked together. You're not fighting everything, and you're starting to get a journal entry here. So if you click on the logs, it'll show all your sessions. You'll have journal entries, and they'll be linked to your notes. So it's a really clean way to organize your campaign. If you use Pathfinder or any of the other rule sets, you could do something similar. There's no reason why this is not exclusive to the D&D rule set. So if you use the same sort of organization, it'll work very similar. So that's a tip, like a pro tip, or someone has been using it for a little bit. I have a feel for what to do, what not to do, that sort of thing. So it really depends on what you need to do and what your usages are. So that's basically the gist of the setup part. And if I wasn't explaining this, and once I'm proficient with it, it'd take me like half an hour at the most to do all that. So the next step is I'm going to set up for the combat, and then we're going to call it a stream, because I don't want to yap too long. It's already been an hour and a half. So what I'm going to do is set this up for the first encounter. So that first encounter comes after you leave Neverwinter, and you get to a certain point on the map, and then you get ambushed. So if you bring up the Goblin Ambush story, which is here in the actual story entries below, It tells you that if you look at the dialog box, you click on the notes, or in this case, the dialogue, it'll send that over to the chat. It says, you've been on the Tribord Trail for about half a day. As you come around a bend, you spot 2 dead horses sprawled about 50 feet ahead of you, blocking the path. Each has several black feathered arrows sticking out of it. The woods press close to the trail here, with a steep embankment and dense thickets on either side. So this was meant to be theater of the mind. There was no map provided with this encounter. If once you learn that, you go, oh, maybe I want a map, or maybe you just want to use that thing on the party sheet where I showed you this order tab. You can kind of use that if you needed to. But what I found is when I was going through and researching the images, there was an image in the campaign area where your images are. And this is something I found when I was actually reading the module, which is why you want to look through it. So there's the cover. This encounter actually doesn't come up till later in the adventure, so I didn't want to use that. I saw this goblin picture. I said, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to show my players that after or before or during the goblin attack. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that into my notes. So I'm going to unlock them, drag and drop this photo, just so it's handy. So when I need to share it, it's right there. And this is where it's going to come up, so it's fine. And then that's just a temporary thing anyways. And then there's this Tribord Trail thing. I'm like, wow, that fits this description down here really well. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as my map kind of, or for my theater of the mind, or whatever you want to use it for. So this is a kind of immersive, kind of makes a really cool backdrop for this encounter because you're going to get jumped on. So basically, I think this image, if you don't have a map or anything like that, you can use this to kind of make the immersion better, and also use it as like a battle map if you want. So I'm going to drag and drop this map into my notes because I'm going to use that. And then my notes, I'm going to link that to the image so that I can get back to it easier. And then I can close this images box. I don't need that anymore. So it's very clean. I got the notes for the encounter here. And then the actual encounter are some goblins. So when you bring that up, they're not really assigned to anything, and they're meant to just be dropped into your combat tracker and run everything in the combat tracker. You don't even need a map. You can just drag and drop from the combat tracker doing combat, and I'll show a little bit of that shortly. So the goblin encounter, I'm going to link that to the map too, just so I have it conveniently there. And then I'm going to put the encounter in the notes too. So these are just convenient buttons for me to click on when I need to get to it quickly. That's all I'm doing. All right, so this is the setup here. So I'm going to use this map as this image, this handout. It wasn't really designed, but you show this to your players. So if you right-click on this link on the top left, that is going to allow the sharing dialog to come up. You click sharing, you have the option to share the record or to stop sharing. If you click share record, it's going to show this picture to your table. And that's how you share images and maps. So once you've done that, you still need to put them on the combat, from the combat tracker to the map, but you need a grid. That's the first thing you want on any image or map, is you want to put a Fantasy Grounds grid. Not the painted grid that might be on the map already, but an actual grid. So I'm going to unlock the map, go to the grid icon, which is on the far right, and I'm going to click on this eyeball, which will toggle the visibility. So there's your 50 by 50 pixel grid, or 5 by 5 square. If you want to go a little bit bigger, if you have bad eyesight, maybe go up to 60. That'll give you a little bit larger icons and such. And that's going to be your grid for the map. That's really all you have to do in Fantasy Grounds. You don't have to use line of sight and all, unless you really want to get into it. So now the Tribord Trail is going to act as our map. It's not very tactical, but it gives you some immersion and some idea of what's going on. I have my encounters linked here. So I'm going to set that encounter up so it's a little easier for me to run it. This is an ambush, and the way this is set up is it's kind of like they want you to run it like just a regular combat, but it's an actual ambush. So there's a whole section on here on how to run it. There's 2 melee, 2 missile weapon users, so there's 4 altogether, and they're on either side of the road. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to lock the image so I have a little bit more room. And if you want more map space, I can close the session 1 notes, drag that over, and then stretch this out more so that I have a little bit more viewing space. And then you can right click on the map, go to the view, and then you're going to left click zoom to fill. And that's going to give you a larger image, so you're not fighting that. If I bring up my session 0 notes, see, I didn't bookmark the session 1s, but I did on this particular area. So I might have to move that if you want to use that space. So I'll just come down here and just stick it on top of this character sheet. It's not going to hurt anything right now. And there's my notes. Now I'm going to set up the encounter. So it's linked to the map, it's linked to my notes, and it's also linked to the story entry. So you would read through this, hopefully before the adventure starts, to kind of get an idea of what's going on. I bring up the ambush. So these are not placed. Right now they're loose. If I send these over to the combat tracker, they're just going to go on there. They're not visible to anyone yet, but they're on there. So that's one way to do this, and then you just run everything out of the combat tracker, drag and drop the attacks and saves and stuff between the combat tracker entries, which is how a lot of rule sets are set up that way. But if you want to do a little bit more than just that and kind of make this like a real ambush, what I'm going to do is go to the menu in the combat tracker, click the garbage can, delete from tracker, and I'm only going to delete all the foes, which is the goblins in this case. So I'm just resetting the encounter basically. And now I'm going to take each one of these little tokens on the encounter, so not the one on the left, but all the ones that are down here on the bottom. I'm going to drag and drop those into the map to have a starting location. Now, if you don't like these tokens that are applied here, if you have any tokens in your assets, you can substitute out the main token for the standard one that they have here that's attached to this NPC. So this would temporarily change these just for this encounter without editing the NPC stat block. So if you wanted to switch out these icons, you didn't like the tokens, you can go to your library and your assets, go to your tokens and search for a goblin and swap it out for this main one. But that'll change all of the tokens in this encounter. The other thing about it is some encounters, if they're not locked, you can unlock them and you can adjust it. So like this encounter here has 4 goblins, right? Well, I kind of want to break it up into 2 groups. So I'm just going to drag and drop this encounter. So that's kind of doubles it up, but it's not really. And I'm going to change that to 2 and change that to 2. So it's still 4 goblins, but they're going to be separate. So these are going to be missile users, and the bottom ones are going to be melee. And that's all I'm doing is just kind of separating them. And then I might change the tokens on those so they're different, so you can tell the difference. So that's something you can do to adjust for it. You can also increase or decrease the number, whatever you want to do, and then I'm going to lock it back up. So that is just a way that you can alter encounters on the fly if you need to. So now I'm going to drag each one of these. So the missile guys, I'm just going to have them on the map or on the image as if they're hiding behind the tree, or maybe they're up in the tree or hiding behind the rocks. And for the melee guys, they're going to be closer. So their starting location is going to be down here, hiding amongst these roots and the cliff face. So that's, once you've placed them, you get these little check marks. Okay, so when you shut this down or you close it, these will disappear, but they are still placed. That's what this little check mark means. So if I close this, they'll disappear temporarily until I run the encounter. So now I'm going to, when the players get on the table and they're ready to start, I can bring that encounter up and hit the down arrow. So if I click on the encounter, click the down arrow, and I can even do this before they connect to the table. So now they appear, and they are grayed out so the players can't see them. But they are in this formation. They're ready to go. It's like a real ambush here. So that's the difference between running it out of the combat tracker and then actually running it off the map. So that's just a setup thing here. And this is where I want to be before the players connect to the table. Now I might drag them into a starting location, the actual players, before they get on the table. So on the combat tracker at the bottom, there's 3 icons, which could be different colors or even different shape. But the green one is actually going to be the friendlies. So I'm going to go ahead and click that and just drag and drop those on there. And that just temporarily places them on the actual map. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just place them in a starting location, and just to kind of get things going. They can kind of, I might give them a zone they can move around in. But basically what I end up doing is I'll put the heavier hitters near the sides or on the flanks, and I'll put the wizard usually in the back here so she doesn't get nailed with something. And then I'll put the fighters over on the left and right. So I just kind of have a starting location, and the rogue is going to be in the middle there too. So that's basically the starting formation. Once that's done, now they're kind of placed and people start getting on the table. When that map is shared, they can pop that up and they'll have access to their tokens. So that's basically how the setup part works for this. So that's almost ready to go. We're at round 0, so there's really no fight going on yet. When it comes time, when the ambush springs out, it tells you how to run it. It says that the goblins get a +6 on their attack rolls or their melee because they use dexterity. So they have a +6 on stealth. So I'm going to bring up each one of these stat blocks for the monsters here and just lay them out just like I did with the character sheets. That makes it easier, so when I bring them up, their sheets are visible and they're not covering anything. So when you click on these buttons, it'll bring the character sheets up or the NPC stat blocks as you need it. So now I'm going to go to the menu and then go to initiative, and I don't have any players to roll off their sheet, so I'm just going to go ahead and click roll initiatives for everybody, including the NPCs. So once I do that, it reshuffles the order, so the actual first person will be this melee fighter over here. If you don't want to, run the ambush where the players lose a turn, because they can be surprised. So what you would do is you could take the +6 and you would roll that in the dice tower. And then what will happen is your players would have to beat that to realize that the goblins are hiding. And what you would find that information is either on the individual character sheets, or as the game master, you would look at the overview and you would know that there is the perception value here. So nobody in here has a 14. So basically the goblins would get the jump on them because that number beats all of their passive perception. So that is basically how that would work. And then you would decide if you want to run that ambush or not. It could be deadly if it's a new group of people that have never played. So you got to be careful with that. But anyway, so now this goblin is going to be the first one to go. So you can say that the goblins all get a turn before even the party members do. So he's going to spring out and run or move over towards this wizard acolyte. So as the game master, I'm going to hold down the Alt key, drag the token over to this area over there. The tokens are locked. And then basically we're at round 1. And that's going to be the first assailant. And it's going to drag and drop the scimitar either in the combat tracker, so I can use he can attack this wizard, or in this case, maybe the folk fighter. Maybe she's up here. And he's going to attack her, so just drag and drop. And that scores a hit, so then I just drag the damage either on the token, the fighter's token, or in the combat tracker, either way. So she took 4 points of damage total, so that's pretty gnarly. So anyways, you go through. The next goblin is this other one. So he's also going to move forward, and he's going to attack this human wizard. Or this is a human noble, excuse me. So again. Oh, that was damage. So I need to roll the attack roll. Well, he missed. So you can go back and manually adjust that. So I just kind of screwed that up. So I reversed it, basically. So that's just where you want to be when you start. So I think that's about as far as I'm going to go today. I'm not going to go through all this combat sequence. Mainly, I want to get you to the point where you're starting your adventure, you have it organized, you're ready to go. So hopefully that helps you get started with Fantasy Grounds, just to kind of give you an idea of how it's laid out and how to get things working. We do teach classes where we get into the combat side of things. That would be a whole nother 2 hours of stuff. So I think I've rambled enough. It's been about an hour and 45 minutes. Hopefully this helps you. And don't forget all the sales that are going on. You got Rob's got his Insanity Bundle at 75% discount. You have the Fantasy Grounds store that has 25% discount on the licenses and some other products that are on the store. So don't forget that. Happy holidays, everyone. I am running a DM 103 class on the 29th or 28th, which will cover creating custom characters and such. So if you guys are interested, join our event, and then we have a whole month of doing the Traveler rule set. So we got a lot of cool guests for that. And then also, if you are wanting to complete your bundle, there's a link that Belle has put in the chat. So this will help you guys get acquainted with the rule set and also to get started. So like I said, you don't have to go out and buy everything. You can just get a license and one of the books and see if you like it. And you can always ask for a return if you buy it on the store. If you buy it on Steam, it works differently. You don't get the same kind of return policy. So anyways, take care, everyone. Yeah, so some of the bundles are on sale. So take care, everybody. Have a good holiday. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And we'll see you around. And all the stuff I mentioned is in the links in the chat.